Are you ready to take your business to the next level? Every day there are countless books and articles that are published offering the key on how to make your business a success. It's easy to feel overwhelmed trying to keep up and run your business. That's why Deb Creer created the Business Power Hour. Keep up on the latest trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. Let the Business Power Hour do the heavy work for you.
Good morning, good morning. I am Deb Creer, and I am passionate about giving professionals the tools that they need to make themselves and their businesses as successful as possible. And we're going to have so much fun today. I just love talking with our guests. We've chatted several times now, just offline, not officially for the program, but it's always fun, especially to be talking to someone else from the C-Suite network. Just love being able to do that. But today we're going to be talking about leadership. And let's be honest, leadership is lacking in a lot of ways. And I think a big part of that is people just really don't know how to be leaders. They're scared to be leaders. They are promoted to being a leader when they weren't prepared for it, maybe aren't even skilled for it, and all of these things. But we're going to talk today about how to be a leader, as opposed to maybe that boss that we all don't want to work for anymore, right? So please join me in welcoming Dr. Gary McGrath to our program today.
Hi, Deb. Well, at least it rhymes.
This is true. So I just kind of merged your name together. I just made it a shorter name. So Gary, welcome to the program.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Great. Well, let me tell people just a little bit about you, and then we will dive into this. So Dr. Gary McGrath has been labeled a unicorn in leadership development. His passion for leadership started when he was an Eagle in the Boy Scouts. After graduating with a dual degree in Mechanical and Metallurgical Engineering, he entered the U.S. Army, where he commanded a unit of 120 soldiers at the ripe old age of 25. He went on to work at several Fortune 500 companies and startup tech companies. He completed his formal education, earning a Doctor of Business Administration in Marketing, which is a DBA. He is also the author of 2 books, Mastering Sales Leadership, Learning to Herd Cats, and A CEO's Journey, The 7 Steps of Intentional Leadership. Dr. Gary believes in paying it forward. Each year, he volunteers his business expertise to a nonprofit for a minimum of 1 year. He is currently working with Habitat for Humanity, Broward County, Florida. He presently lives in North Carolina with his bride, Kristie, and his dog, Bailey. So again, Dr. Gary, welcome.
Thanks, Deb. It's good to be here, especially when we have the opportunity to talk about leadership.
I love it. Well, first, thank you for your service. I always like to thank our veterans for anything that they have done, because that really is a great place to learn leadership. And so again, thank you so much for your service. But you've done several things throughout the years. I mean, we were talking about that in your bio. I always love learning how my guests got to where they are today and how they discovered that this really is their passion in life. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, I guess there was 2 things growing up that struck me. Number one is when I was a Boy Scout, we had a troop leader that turned the troop around in a matter of minutes. I'm sitting back there. I was a brand new Eagle Scout. I was the senior patrol leader. I was in charge of the troop, and my best friend, Tom Cross, we got our Eagle Scout together. We did it. We worked together as a team. And because I was a year older, I got to be the senior patrol leader. He was the junior patrol leader. So it was seniority. But I was sitting back there, and the troop leader, this new troop leader, walks in. He gets to know everybody over the course of a couple of months. And he gets up in front. He says, boys, I want to make an announcement today. We've got the Jamboree, this Boy Scout Jamboree coming in the fall. We've got 6 months to practice. There are 16 events. We're going to work on it. We're going to break down into teams. We're going to learn all 16 events, and we're going to compete. We want to be the best scout troop in this competition. And we're going to start working on that tonight. We're going to break it down in teams. You're going to have team leaders and so on. And then we've got the adults here that are going to help you. And if there's any questions about anything that you want, there's the Boy Scout handbook. All the answers are in the Boy
Mm-hmm.
Scout handbook. So let's get started. So I'm sitting back there, and it was just this energy, Deb, that he expressed
Mm-hmm.
this goal of wanting to compete in this jamboree,
Mm-hmm.
and a process between that day and 6 months from now
Mm-hmm.
of training and team building and a standard operating procedure
Mm-hmm.
and the handbook and then coaching and mentoring from the adults. It was just in just a matter of minutes, there were all these aspects of it, but
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know what all of those words meant that I'm expressing today.
Right.
I just knew the feeling that I had,
Mm-hmm.
which was a feeling of excitement and
Mm-hmm.
energy in the troop that hadn't
Mm-hmm.
been there for quite some time. So I walked up to the troop leader afterwards and I said, "Sir, I have a question for you." And he goes, "What's that?" I says, What was that?"
Mm-hmm.
And he put his hand on my shoulder, Deb, and he said, "Gary, that's leadership."
Mm-hmm.
And that word struck me.
Mm-hmm.
And as I said, there were two things. Before that word hit me, I can remember when I was younger, I had this feeling that I was going to do something important. I didn't know what it was.
Mm-hmm.
And for many, many years, I searched for that importance, but I always worked on my own leadership development,
Mm-hmm.
trying to get better as a leader, trying to engage people better,
Mm-hmm.
all the things that we talk about in leadership, making tons of mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
I used to joke about taking over departments, and I had 7 different jobs in 10 years in manufacturing with Procter & Gamble and Scott Paper. I would turn the department, as soon as they saw I could turn a department around, they stuck me in there. And I would tell people, here's the deal. We're going to start moving forward. We're going to make a lot of decisions here because we need to improve things.
Mm-hmm.
And our job is to make 10 decisions when other people would be making only 2 or 3, because we got to move. We got to make things happen.
Mm-hmm.
And in that, we want to have 8 decisions that we make that are positive, 2 that are negative, and the net, we hope, is positive. So let's get to work. And I just was, every time I did this, I was able to turn the department around, and I was able to learn a lot about leadership and a lot about my own style and how I would screw things up and make mistakes and say things I shouldn't say and all these things. But I was learning every moment and building up to get to do what I do today. And when I do executive coaching with CEOs and presidents of companies, I say, look, you know what my job is? He said, what? My job is to help you become the best possible leader. And I've been working for 50 years to get to this point. And I'm going to offer you every ounce of what I've learned, what I've experienced, what mistakes I've made, so that you can be better without making all the mistakes, I hope. And I've been working towards this moment, and here I am.
I love it. I love it. And I think so many people get things a little bit confused when they become that manager, that owner, that team leader, that whatever. And they think, and I mean, they are the boss, but in many cases, they think that means I can just boss you around. I can just tell you what to do. And that really struck home in your story about the scouts, because that scout leader, he first of all, he did say what the goals were, because we can't accomplish anything without knowing what our end point is. But he really made it clear that it was a team and that everybody was working together. And so it's not just, I'm going to tell you what we're going to do, and by darn, you're going to do it. It was, okay, here's the process that we're going to go through. And you also mentioned in your book, which is a great book, CEO's Journey, the 7 Steps of Intentional Leadership. I read it. And you talk about this in there. And a lot of times, the kids that are getting ready for Jamboree start like 3 weeks before, and they cram it all in. And he was starting 6 months before. So that made things much more realistic. It also gives a lot of time when things don't work to figure out how to make them work. And I think a lot of times leaders forget that.
Yeah. And the other part of it, I think, is the pressure you put on the kids in that 2 or 3 weeks to try to do things perfectly or exactly. Whereas when you look at it, you say we have 26 weeks, you say, look, what we want to do is we want to just do a little bit of improvement each week, just get a little bit better, because to win this, we only have to be 1% better than the competition.
Right.
We don't need to be perfect. We don't need to be,
we just got to be a little bit better.
Just a little bit better. And if we can take life that way and just say, look, the process of life is about being a little bit better each day.
Right.
each week, and
Right.
just learning how to do that. And you mentioned in the introduction, we talked about what I do is I help leaders learn how to be leaders, not what to do. If you want to know what to do, read my book.
Right.
Read The Leadership Challenge by Kusin Posner. Read Leadership is an Art by Max Dupre. I've read hundreds of books, and I know what they say, and I know what they have to offer. But what is important is the ability to execute on the what, to be able to achieve the how, and be able to achieve the why, to be able to get to the why through the how with the what.
Right.
I often use a metaphor for this that I'd like to share with you, Deb. I ask audiences quite often if anybody in the audience has had appendicitis. Have you had appendicitis?
No, but
No.
yeah, luckily I haven't.
Good. If I've got 100 people in the room, there's probably at least one person in the room that's had appendicitis.
Right.
I said, so what do you do with an inflamed appendix? And they said, well, you remove it. Like, do you take it out? I'm like, exactly. So if you have an appendicitis, when you had it, did you remove it? And they're like, well, yeah. I said, oh, so you took it out yourself? And they said, well, no.
Well, no.
I said, well, no, so you said, look, you know what to do. Take out the appendix, hand the scalpel to your spouse and ask them to take it out. Would you do that? Not unless your spouse is a surgeon.
Right.
Right. Of
There's
course
not enough YouTube videos for that.
No. So why is it that we don't remove it? We know what, and yet we take people and we promote them into management positions. We hand them a book, or we tell them what to do, and we expect them to be good leaders. And the fact is they've not been taught how to do it.
Right.
And the problem with this metaphor is managers are being handed the scalpel of responsibility without any training. And when they go into the operating room, they're not the ones that perish.
Right.
It's the employee on the operating table because they don't know how to be a leader. And we have to get better at helping people connect the what and the why with the how that's in the middle of execution in leadership. And I like to use the quote that leaders do 1,000 little things right. And that's why it's so hard to learn to be a good leader, because you have to learn to get to mediocre. You have to learn 500 of those 1,000, right? Just to get to average, you got to learn 500. And I tell people with training and experience and coaching and mentoring, it takes 5 to 10 years for people to become mediocre. And yet we still throw people into these positions and expect them, by telling them what to do, that they're supposed to do it without really good
you have that
professional
job
coaching
title,
and support.
therefore do.
That's right.
Yeah. And I think one of the big things that especially when you're initially thrust into it, or even if you've been in a leadership position for a long time, you think you have to do it all, and you have to do it, and you can't have a team. You have to do the surgery yourself. And that is, of course, the biggest error in this. But somehow we have it in our brains. And the same thing works if you're a small business owner. You think, well, if I don't do it all and do it all by myself, I'm a failure. I'm admitting there's something wrong if I have to have somebody else do it. Well, of course, we all have to have somebody else help us. If you're a small business owner, you're probably not a tax attorney. You probably don't know tax law. You probably don't know business law. You need a CPA, marketing. I mean, all these various things. Nobody is going to know it all, or they know just enough, as we say, to be dangerous. And what that means is they don't do it well. And same thing with, if you're the team leader, you think, well, I have to do it all. I can't delegate because that shows weakness.
Well, I think it's not that they can't, it's that they won't. Because delegation is a skill like any skill.
Right.
But what you're talking about, and this is in my 7 steps of intentional leadership and step 1 purpose, is mindset. It's what's my mindset.
Right.
And if my mindset is that I have to do it right, that I can't give it to somebody else, or I'm afraid that they will make a mistake and do it wrong. And one of the things that I was reminded of recently when I was listening to somebody talk about this in leadership, they said, well, before you make a decision, ask yourself the question, what's the worst that can happen?
Right.
If I delegate something to somebody and they only get it half right, what's the worst that can happen? And people sometimes have since you bring up this whole idea of delegation, the mindset of having to do it myself or the fear of somebody making a mistake, all of those mindsets are going to prevent us from ever being an effective leader.
Right.
Because leadership, our definition of leadership is the ability to build relationships so we can achieve our goals together with compassionate accountability.
Right.
Now, what part of that says I have to do the work? None of it.
Right.
Achieve our goals together and utilize the strengths and competencies of each person in the team to contribute their uniqueness to the team in a way that makes a much stronger outcome. The challenge for a lot of entrepreneurs is this old book that's out there called The Entrepreneurial Myth. Is most people I was a sole proprietor. I did consulting and coaching. I did training. I did all those things. And now I've got 8 statarians that work for me. You know, my business name is Statarius. So I call them statarians on my team. And these are, I've got a PhD industrial psychologist and every single one of them have master's degrees and years of Fortune 500 experience. And they come in, do you think I'm going to tell them how to teach, train, and coach? No, they tell me.
Right.
Okay. I have this framework, the 7 steps of intentional leadership. And I say within the framework, we're going to do these things. And Deb, the things that these professionals bring to the table makes our company so much stronger and better because I'm willing to give up the control and allow them to work within the boundaries that I've set within the company and let them just create magic.
Right.
And we all have that opportunity if we can overcome the mindset.
Right. Yeah. You know, and I struggle with that. You know, I'm pretty type A. And so I struggle with, well, you know, Gary, if I have you do it, it's not the way I would do it. And, you know, and probably not. And so what I continually have to tell myself is just because it's not the way I would do it doesn't mean it's wrong. And oh my gosh, it might actually be better. You know, and that really is one of the challenges. I think a lot of people have that, you know, if I'm going to, you know, if it's going to be done, it has to be done my way because that's the right way. That's the only way. You know, and of course it's not. Granted, there are some things that, you know, but even you can take out appendix different ways. You know, you can do all.
But
these
even
things.
let's change the word quite often, not the only way, but the best way. People are making a judgment on it being not even just, you know, the only way, but the best way. Mine's the best way. You say, well, if let's say somebody else does it and it's good enough. Maybe it's not the best way, but maybe they can learn better. Okay. And we need to ask a different question to ourselves and to those around us. And this is what I had to learn coming up, starting in my first business in 1990, going back in the business world, and then finished my doctorate in 2009 and starting this company. Well, early on, I thought, well, what do I have to add to this body of knowledge of leadership? I mean, you've got these brilliant people out there, you know, Warren Bennis and Max Dupree and John Maxwell. And these are, you know, well-known names for anybody that's in leadership and brilliant. But what do I have to add? Okay. Well, my podcast is called Leading from the Front. Leadership is a responsibility, not a position. Leadership is a responsibility. And that is what we have to ask people to do for them to have a voice, to learn to communicate. Everybody can learn leadership capabilities, to have a voice in the right situation, the right way, to speak up and add to the value of the organization. Well, here's what I found. If I've got a room of 20 people that I'm training, and I've got another statarian that's working with me, who has a different voice, a different way of saying things, I will watch when I say something and then they might jump in and add something to what I said. And you will see light bulbs go off on different people.
Right. Yeah. It just strikes them different.
Mine isn't the best. Mine is a way. It's not the only way.
Mm-hmm.
It might not even be the best way.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a way.
Mm-hmm.
And if I can change the words in my mindset, in my brain, from the way to a way,
mm-hmm.
and recognize the voice of another human being
Mm-hmm.
that will connect with other people, then we have an opportunity
mm-hmm.
to grow as a team.
Right. And it really does. Sometimes it is, that it strikes somebody different. Sometimes women want to learn from women. Sometimes millennials want to learn from baby boomers. I mean, all these various things. And so, we have to keep that in mind when we are those leaders, and I mean, we can, public speaking, great example. We can clearly tell when we're speaking who's paying attention and who's not. I've had people fall asleep. I hate doing presentations right after lunch because, it doesn't matter if they had turkey or not, they had just enough food that they're, or, maybe they're not sleeping. They're sitting there playing on their phone. They're doing these various things. And so you do have to wonder, okay, what is it that, and maybe it's, at that point you think, okay, I just need to change how I'm communicating. But there are just different ways that people, because we all learn differently. It can even be things as this person isn't, I'm they're not getting what the slide says because they want to hear it. All these various things, and that's where kind of having these multiple people helps that process.
Yeah, so I'll go back to my tennis coaching and teaching. I was a certified tennis coach. I coached University of Wisconsin Green Bay for 3 years. Yeah, so big tennis powerhouse. But anyway, what we learned as a certified teaching professional is each person has either a visual, an audio, or kinesthetic processing mode, or a combination of the two. And we need to present. And that's why, as a public speaker, like you said, you've got the slides, you have people stand up and move, you have exercises, and you speak. So you're doing VAC, visual, audio, kinesthetic approach to teaching, training, and communicating as much as possible because of people's learning styles. It's not about me.
Right.
And leadership is not about me. If somebody doesn't get it, then I need to figure out another way for them to get it. And sometimes that means another person.
Right.
The work that I do is I can't tell you the number of times I've turned an executive over to one of my staff because I'm just not getting through to this person. They just don't click.
There's just something.
Just,
like you said, you don't there. Click.
So I'll look at this person, and maybe I'll get Dr. Vito, who is my industrial psychologist, and he's a very high introvert, very analytical, very process oriented. I'm a little bit more kind of extemporaneous. I don't follow process as much. I just kind of like to let things flow. And sometimes it just doesn't work for people. So I'll turn them over to Dr. Vito, or I'll turn them over to Dina. Like you said, some people would prefer to have a female coach. And it may be a woman and it might be a man. He might prefer to have a female coach. Right. So whatever the situation is, it's not looking at what we do as a weakness. I don't talk about weaknesses. I talk about limitations. We have competencies that we learn through training and experience, but there are certain things I just really struggle with. I can't learn it. And, people say, oh, that's a fixed mindset. What do you mean you can't? Well, okay. So here's the deal. I have a learning disability where I have a challenge reading, which then affects my ability to learn foreign languages. When I combine the fact that I have practically no memory, or terrible memory, okay, and combine that with having to memorize an English word and a foreign word to be able to translate that in my head in the moment when somebody's talking, can't do it.
Not going to happen.
Not going to happen. I'm a visual. So can I learn a foreign language? Yes, but I have to learn it with it. I have to immerse myself in it. And when I spent a week in Mexico years ago on a conference, I was starting to, I got Rosetta Stone like a couple of times. I'm learning it online. I'm learning some of the words. Did I learn some of it? Did I get better? Yes.
Right.
By the end of the week, I was a little bit better. Am I ever going to be a translator for the UN? No. Okay. So there's levels in all this, right? But what I would do is I want to find out where my strengths are, where the strengths of the rest of the team are, and make the assignments in accordance with those strengths. And don't let anything happen in the team where people can't have cross role responsibilities, okay, where they can support and help each other because of things that one team member does better than another team member, but it's not part of their job. But you go up and you ask them, hey, Deb, could you do this for Gary? And you go, oh yeah, I love to do that. Well, that's great because Gary hates doing it, right? How much stronger does that make the team?
Right. Well, and it's always, the thing about teamwork is it is kind of this moving thing. We were talking, as we were just chatting before the program, about college sports. As we are recording this, the day before yesterday, they announced the brackets for the NCAA basketball tournament. And, one of the things that I always have an issue with in college sports are these superstars that, and I mean, it's going to happen. I mean, hello, I'm from Denver, Peyton Manning, John Elway. But the problem is, when your superstar goes down, then can the other team members adapt? I was watching CU's basketball game this weekend. It was late. Oh my gosh. The problem with living here on the East Coast and they play, out on Pacific time, these games were starting at midnight and our star player got elbowed. It just, right in the face, several minutes into the game, down he went off the court and out of the room he went because he was going out for concussion protocol. And so the first thought was, we're done. We've lost. That's just that really, I was texting people midnight. Oh my gosh, we're done. We're done. Well, of course he is a senior. And so the guard behind him, his backup, stepped in, did a wonderful job. Was it as good? It was different. And it was funny because that was what they were pointing out afterwards in the articles and the coverage was this person stepped in a different way, but got the job done. And I think that's really the true thing about teamwork is your superstar can go out and everybody just adapts and fills in.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and what does that point to? Great coaching.
Yes.
Because they prepare them. And I can guarantee in the practices, there are times when that second stringer plays with the starters.
Right.
They switch it up and they play with the starters and then they get defended by the star who's a better defender. So that makes the second stringer better. So that's just great coaching. And it's a great metaphor for us to think about in our businesses of cross training. And one of the challenges, I have to tell you, Deb, one of the challenges that I have when we talk about coaching and using sports coaches as an example is there are certain aspects of it that are true. Like, for instance, if you're going to truly delegate to your team, then you delegate and you have to let them play. Because I have yet to see a college basketball coach hit the winning basket.
Right.
Because they're not on the floor or they're not on the field, or that they have to prepare the team to make that shot and make the play. And it's the same way for leaders in a lot of ways, and letting your people play, letting your people work, letting them get the work done. And there's a balance between understanding the competency level, the amount of management and accountability that has to happen, and the amount of delegation. You don't just delegate without training.
Right.
Because that's not delegation, that's abdication.
That's throwing to the wolves.
That's absolutely right. Sink or swim. And I always use that metaphor as well. Well, that's how we did it. We learned how to sink or swim. I said, that's great. So you throw somebody in the deep end of the pool, and what you're going to create is either a swimmer, a aquaphobia, where somebody's afraid of the water.
They're not going to do that again.
Right. Or somebody that survives, goes to the shallow end, gets out of the pool and says, I don't ever want to do that again.
Yep.
And then, of course, there are a few dead bodies at the bottom of the pool.
Yeah. They didn't make it at all.
They didn't make it at all. I mean, that's just crazy to teach, to treat people that way is just, it's insane.
Right.
So when we talk about leadership, and this is why I wrote the book, A CEO's Journey, over the course of the years, I've been kind of cobbling together my thoughts on what makes a great leader. What are the fundamentals that are needed in order to make a great leader? or just a competent leader.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Somebody that does, the company doesn't go bankrupt under.
Right. So what I always ask people, I'll ask you, Deb, what is the starting point for developing leadership? Where do you start? What, so it's like, what's step one?
Mm-hmm.
And I ask people this, and in conversations, I'll
Mm-hmm.
talk to CEOs that want to hire me, and I go, how do you develop your leaders, and where do you start? And to this day, nobody's ever given me the specific answer.
Right.
And I've asked thousands and thousands of people this. And yet I'll say, what they might say is, well, you have to develop yourself. And I'm like, you're absolutely right. You got to go inside. Totally. That's right. How do you do that? Oh, I don't know. Well, I have the answer. And I'd like to say, buy my book and you can find it out. But I tell you what, spoiler alert, I'm just going to tell you.
Okay.
Step one is purpose. And the first component of purpose is to have a personal written mission statement.
Right. I have that page open on your website. Build your mission statement today. See, I was prepared and you didn't even know.
There you go. You can go right to my website and get this. Because here's the thing. If you're a leader and life's kicking you around and you're having a bad day and we don't have an anchor, something to hold on to that reminds us of who we are and what we stand for and what's most important to us, we're going to make mistakes. And sometimes we're going to make massive mistakes. Right. Our mission statement grounds us. It helps us remind us, even in those horrible times, when you have a terrible day, just everything goes wrong. You've got clients that are calling you and they're complaining. You've got prospects that are calling that are saying, we're not going to buy from you. You've got employees that are calling out sick, or, COVID got them and they can't come to work. And you're working with half the workforce now, and just one thing after the other. And then you go home and at 9:00 at night, you look yourself in the mirror and you say, this has been a horrible day.
Yeah.
It's been a tough day. And on top of it, one of my kids are sick. And I look in the mirror and I say to myself, did I live my mission statement today? And if I can say yes, that's a great day. Right. It doesn't matter what happens to you. It's how you live your life. Right. And that's where leadership starts. And to this day, I haven't had anybody tell me, oh yeah, I know, it's to write a personal mission statement. Right. Well, that's where I start all my coaching sessions. Because unfortunately, when I worked for the Covey Leadership Center back in the 90s, and habit 1 is be proactive. Habit 2 is begin with the end in mind. One of the things that they did was have you write a mission statement, which I did back in like 1993. And that was the beginning of the thinking that I had with the work that I do today. About 3 or 4%, maybe 5% of the population had a written mission statement back then. Today, it's less than 1%. We're going in the wrong direction. So I challenge people, I implore them, please take the time to go inside and take the time maybe to write down what you want people to say about you in 20 years, 30 years. I'm retiring in 30 years. What would I want them to say about me? Not what would they say today, because maybe some of that wouldn't be pretty. All right. Or maybe we do things that we wish we hadn't done. Great. Use that as a foundation to identify and specify exactly who you are and who you want to be in the future. Right. And start living that every day.
Right. And I love the book because it is a journey of a CEO, and he's going through, his company is struggling. He asks in a very dear friend, a trusted mentor. And so, she's guiding him through this process. And as you said, the first step is your mission statement. And I think one of the key things that so many people need to remember is it's your personal mission statement. It's not what is your mission statement for your company, or even as that leader in that company or nonprofit or whatever it is. It's your person. And so it's going to include your personal values, all of these various things. And I think that really is one of the problems is we get so caught up in being that leader, and in many cases doing whatever it takes to make things be successful or to not be a failure. because those are two different things, right? And we lose ourselves. There's a reason why many CEOs are very, they don't live long. That there's depression, there's health issues, all these various things. And so, one of the things that you talk about in the book is, you need to eat better, exercise. I mean, all of those things, because that's going to make you healthier, which will then in turn make you, help you, not make you, will help you be a better leader. But this mission statement, it really is critical to see, okay, what is important to me? And I'm guessing sometimes when you have people go through this, they go, hey, my personal mission statement isn't anywhere close to where I'm working. I shouldn't be working there.
That's absolutely true. I can remember that actually happening in one of the first workshops I did with the 7 Habits back in the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
We were working with a company, and there was a vice president there, and we helped him with his mission statement. And like the 3rd day of the training, he came in and he said, I just came to realize that
Mm-hmm.
that I don't belong here.
Mm-hmm.
This is not what I want to do. We have a very intense 9-month leadership development program.
Mm-hmm.
And we take people through this whole process of the 7 steps and coaching and training and mentoring and application, all this stuff. And we have a 3.5-day boot camp to start the program.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't tell you the number of executives that at the end of the boot camp, they make commitments to change certain aspects
Mm-hmm.
of their life that they've come to realize
Mm-hmm.
over that 3.5 days, that they have been violating their own character in trying to, in the ambition of achieving some goals
Mm-hmm.
at work. And I can remember a very important one where the senior VP who became the CEO of a company later on, standing in front of this group of executives that he worked with after this program, and he said, I walk in the door at night and I have so much going on in my head.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still thinking about work. And he had young kids that were like 7 and 10.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, oh, daddy's home. Daddy is their hero.
Right.
He's home.
He's their world.
He's their world in that moment, right? And he said, I would walk in and I barely pay attention to him.
Mm-hmm.
And he, with tears in his eyes, literally with tears in his eyes, he says, that stops today. Mm-hmm. And this stuff changes people's lives because it really takes effort, and it takes thought, and it takes recognition of what your character is and what's truly important. And without that anchor of a mission statement, life kicks our ass. It pushes us around.
Right.
It gives us that anchor in the ocean of life, if you want to go with the metaphor, right?
Right.
So when the hurricane hits, you can still hold on and not get swept away.
Right. And of course, one of the important things is that not only do you complete it, you have others complete it too. The people who work for you, and then the people who work for them, and it trickles down, and all those various things. They should, everyone should have their own personal mission statement. And clearly those are going to change, as people age, as they have families, their families leave the nest. I mean, all these various things. But and then they all, then you kind of have to figure them out. You gave the example in the book of the one person who in her personal life was really, really struggling, which then of course affected how things were at work. But nobody at work knew that she was having those issues. Now, that gets tricky. I mean, we don't need to know everybody's home details about everything that's going on, but employees need to, or maybe it's a business associate, whatever it is, they need to feel like they can tell you, hey, this is what's going on, and then you work through it. I think there's a book called Compassionate Leader, and I think that's a big part of it. Is again, leaders either think they're on a pedestal, they put themselves on that pedestal. And, and they think, oh, we can't know those personal details. Okay. Yeah. Yes, there are some legal ramifications, folks. We're not talking about, don't cross those lines. But, if you're going to have your personal mission statement, then everybody should have their personal mission statement. And as you said, that's the foundation. Then you go from there.
Yeah. Well, to that point, I had a CEO that I worked with for a while. And some of the things that I do, and I want to come back to emotional intelligence and the things that you're talking about, because social awareness and that emotional intelligence would allow me enough awareness to be able to see in your face the struggle that you're having outside of work. So I'll share my first statistic with you. 85% of all performance problems at work are because of things outside of work. So although people don't need to, there's no legal requirement, but again, leadership is about building relationships. And if I have a relationship with you, Deb, and I can see the strain and the stress on your face, and I say, Deb, you're really struggling with this. And in the past, you've like nailed this. You haven't had any problems with it. What's going on? And you might say, well, I'm just having some problems at home. I'm like, okay, you don't need to give me the details.
Right. Yeah.
But I can say to you, is there anything I can do to help?
Yeah.
Is there something I can take away to just kind of relieve some of the stress for a little while? And just that little bit of hope, that caring and demonstration is really, really important. So the application, I actually heard somebody say recently, well, emotional intelligence becoming a cliche. Emotional intelligence and cognitive judgment are the only two scientifically correlated characteristics and measurable characteristics of leadership effectiveness. Everything else is anecdotal, but I can measure emotional intelligence and I can measure cognitive judgment. And why do I say cognitive judgment? Because as a leader, the decisions you make mean everything. And if you don't have good judgment, you're going to make bad decisions and you're going to affect everybody else in the team. But I can measure those two. And you can learn those two, and I can get better. So until somebody comes up with something better, emotional intelligence is not a cliche.
Right.
It's a skill that we need to learn as leadership, and it's directly correlated to our ability to be great at leadership.
Right. Well, and of course, the key is to recognize things early on, and to try and help alleviate the situation, whatever it is, before they become critical. You don't want to have the employee that, you thought, something doesn't quite seem right, but I don't want to pry. I don't want to do this. And then they quit. They, something very tragic happens, all these various things. I mean, if weeks before, months before, whenever, if you had said, hey, Gary, what's going on? Is there something I can help with? That, and maybe it was they needed an extra day off, or it is something, who knows? I mean, there's no way to know these things, but yeah, it's much better to try and help at the start than to try and do damage control later.
Yeah. And I've got to have a strong enough relationship where I can say, hey, Deb, something seems to be bothering you. If it's something outside of work, you don't need to tell me what it is.
Right.
I don't need to have, but what can I do to help? What can we do to take some of the pressure off? Eventually, do you need to be able to get back up to your level of performance? Yeah, eventually. But it's really important that we don't just hurt people with punishment or firing because they fail at something once or they struggle with something for a while. Because what people don't recognize quite often is we've got to hold people accountable. They've got to make sure they do it. They toe the line. And I'm like, okay, I get that. And we also have to treat them like human beings.
Right.
That's why we have the phrase. The golden
rule really does apply.
Well, that's why we have compassionate accountability. And we know it as parents. It's called tough love. It's the same thing.
Right.
We want to establish boundaries and hold our children accountable to let them know that we love and care them enough to have appropriate boundaries as they grow up.
Right.
That's the definition of tough love. With our employees, we want to demonstrate compassionate accountability so that we know that they're achieving the goals that they need to achieve as an individual contributor for the team, and at the same time be compassionate enough to recognize when they need a break.
Right.
When do they need not just a 10-minute break, but do they need some help? And imagine what that does for the team. If as the leader, I recognize it, I say, Deb, I recognize that you're really challenged right now and something's going on. It's okay.
Mm-hmm.
What can I do to help? Let's work on this. And we go to the team and we say, hey team, we need to help Deb with a couple of these. She's got a lot on her plate right now. We don't need to go into details. A lot on her plate. Here's what we're going to do as a team. We're going to, Joe, you're going to take something. Nancy, you're going to take something. We're going to help her out and take this off her plate, help her out the next couple of weeks. Okay. We ready to go? And off we go.
Right.
What does that do for the team?
Right.
You're demonstrating compassion and accountability with the team.
Right. And then Joe and Nancy know the next time they might be the ones that are going to need help.
Yes, exactly. And you can even say, look, if you're struggling, let the team know. Don't feel like you have to carry the burden of your life alone. Nobody gets through this life alone.
Right. Right.
So that to me is the ability in those moments as a leader to recognize those opportunities to demonstrate compassion, to demonstrate caring in a way that builds loyalty and strength in the team going forward.
Right. Well, that's great, except for what happened a year ago. It's been almost exactly a year ago. The world shut down. And anybody who says we're going to go back to normal, no, it's not going to happen. Things are going to be different with how we go forward. And so I, as we're talking about this, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, it's more difficult than ever to lead. You talk about, seeing someone and recognizing that they might have a problem. Well, that's great if you're spending 8 hours a day in an office with them. But what about if you're on a Zoom call with them for 15 minutes? Or I mean, all these various things. So how have things shifted for you? I mean, the principles obviously are still the same, but how have you shifted, last year and obviously going forward with working with people who, may never even be in the same office again, or all of these various things?
Well, I think, and I appreciate what you said is the approach, the principles of leadership don't change.
Right.
Because leadership is about people, management is about things. But how we engage each other has to change. And what that means is that we need to be able to take a little bit more one-on-one time, not just group time, because you can sit in a meeting with 5 or 6 people and you can get a sense of the way people are feeling.
But when there's a little bitty screen up in the corner,
no way, no way. So I tell people one of the things that we have in step 7 under execution, is meeting cadence. Meeting cadence is a fundamental aspect of leadership and management. Daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, annual meeting cadence. We look at these and each one of them has a different requirement. Now there's a lot of, depending on the department, if it's not a tactical, let's say it's customer service or an office space, daily meeting. What are the priorities today? What are you working on, Deb? What am I working on? What's going on with the team? And is there anything that we need to know as a team? Oh, Deb, you're leaving early today because you got a doctor's appointment. You're leaving at 3. Okay, great. Nancy, I'll use Nancy and Joe again since they're in the conversation. Nancy, can you cover for Deb? Yeah, we got it. So each day you have a meeting for tactical coordination. You also have a weekly department meeting that looks out, always the first thing is, how did we do this week? And what are we going to be doing the next 2 weeks? We always go out twice as long as the meeting is. Monthly one-to-ones. Okay. A monthly one-to-one is a 1 to 2 hour meeting with the direct report, where the direct report walks in the office with the meeting prepared. It's their meeting, not the leader's meeting. They come in. These are my goals. These are my challenges. These are the successes. And this is what I'm going to be working on. Okay. The quarterly is kind of an annual strategic reset. How are we doing the next 90 days?
Right.
Let's look out and then the annual strategic planning. But at the tactical level, daily, weekly, monthly has to happen. And what we need to do is in the monthly meeting, because of the way things are, you need to have a 10, 15 or 30-minute check-in with every single employee one-on-one every week. You got to look them in the face and you got to say, Deb, how are you doing? Okay. Right. Now there's one thing I want to add to all of this, all of these meetings, right? If they're well organized and well facilitated, they're not overwhelming.
Right.
They have a specific purpose. The purpose is different. And you don't keep doing the same thing over and over again from the daily, weekly to the monthly. They're different meetings. But there's one other thing that we do in all of our meetings, a statement of gratitude, especially in the last year.
Right. Because it's hard.
Well, our brain automatically is conditioned to go to the negative. Our
Right.
brain is conditioned to go to survival. So people are like, oh, I've got to wear my mask. I've got to keep my distance. I'm like, don't get close to me. Don't sneeze on me. Don't, survival. Okay. We deal with that every day. But what are we grateful for? I often, when I'm doing coaching first thing in the morning, people say, what are you grateful for? And I'm like, my cup of coffee.
Right. It can be a little thing, but holy schmoly, you don't have that cup of coffee? Ooh.
So the 24 virtues that are character virtues that Dr. Martin Seligman, the father of positive psychology, talks about, these 24 virtues. Out of the 24, there are only 2 that are individually connected to happiness. Gratitude and lifelong learning. If you can learn something every day and you can be grateful every day, you're going to be happier.
Right.
You're just going to create that level of happiness. So I encourage people to understand some of these small things that are in the 7 steps of intentional leadership that creates a foundation for leadership development. And there's 7 steps and there's 1 component, there's 3 components with each one of the steps. So there's 21 components, as you know, but those components are just fundamental. It's just, I'll give you one more in step 7 and execute. Always have an action plan coming out of your meetings. Every single meeting should know what's going to be done, who's going to do it, and by when. The 3 W's, what, who, and when. That's it.
Again, we can't meet our goals if we don't know what the heck our goals are.
Well, and but the activities that you're going to get done towards that goal, when you're going to get it done. And the biggest thing we often forget to do, hey, Deb, by when are you going to get that done? Is that this week? Is it next week? No, I'll take care of that. Okay, when? Is it by Wednesday? Is it by the end of the month? What's the when? And that's the biggest thing. You'll be in a meeting and people will be like, okay, so we're good, right? Yep, we're good. All right, cool. We know what everybody's doing. Yep, and they go. They don't document the what. They don't say who.
Right.
And they don't say when. And then they come back a week later. Everybody get that done? Oh, sure.
Yeah.
That's not accountability.
No.
So simple principle. What, who, and when.
And I think now, it's one of these things that I think, is obviously very fluid, but I think all of this it's always obviously very important, but now more so than ever, because we're not in offices with people. You can't just pop in and say, hey, Gary, you got that? How you doing on that project? I mean, you kind of can, but you're popping in on a computer screen as opposed to over their shoulder. And all of these various things, it's just, and we also have to remember that there's, the gratitude thing. I love the gratitude statement because it has been a rough year and we have been so inundated with bad, icky news. We're not saying that things haven't been bad. They're, just in so many ways. And I live in Georgia, so let's just, politics aside, every time you turn on the TV, every time you go to Facebook, all of these various things, it's bad, 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 bad. And so to stop and think and verbalize it to the people you're working with. Here's what I'm grateful for today. We all know that, or, we've heard that having gratitude journals is good, all these things, but I like telling it to someone because it's kind of a little accountability thing, but at the same point, it really is just showing, it's not as bad as we think. And in many cases, it really can be something as simple as I got my cup of coffee today. Yeah. Might be, I got to go have a walk. For somebody, maybe my Wi-Fi didn't go down today. All of these various things. And, or it could be something major, we just got a $1 million client, but, that gratitude, and then it feeds on itself. And I can never remember this principle where, if you're wanting to buy a new red car, you never see a new red car of that model until you're thinking, I want to buy that. And then they're everywhere. Same thing with gratitude. When you're thinking those gratitude thoughts, then you see others, you hear others, and we start toning out. Now, we're not ignoring, but we're toning out, toning down that bad news, and looking more for the gratitude things.
Yeah. Otherwise, we'll see all the bad.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So I'm going to give you one other exercise that
Okay.
comes out of Martin Seligman's book, Flourish, which he
Mm-hmm.
wrote in 2011. And it's about, instead of just happiness, but how do we flourish?
Mm-hmm.
And here's the exercise. And it's something you reminded me when you said the gratitude journal.
Mm-hmm.
This goes just another step beyond that. At the end of the day, 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night,
Mm-hmm.
you write down 3 things that went well today.
Mm.
And then you write why.
Ah.
And that's the key, is you
Mm-hmm.
write 3 things that went well
Mm-hmm.
and why. Because what you're going to find is it went well because you planned for this a
Mm-hmm.
month ago,
Mm-hmm.
because you have this relationship with someone and
Mm-hmm.
they helped you out. They made a
Mm-hmm.
phone call. Whatever it might be, you're going to find out that you did something in the past
Mm-hmm.
to contribute to this victory, this small victory that you
Mm-hmm.
had today that went well.
Mm-hmm.
And the combination of recognizing the positive thing that went well and
Mm-hmm.
the why, if you do it for 7 days,
Mm-hmm.
they say that the latent feeling will stick with you for
Mm-hmm.
30,
Wow.
that it just gets into your psyche
Mm-hmm.
and it helps. 3 things a day,
Mm-hmm.
what went well
Mm-hmm.
and why,
Mm-hmm.
and you'll change the way you
Mm-hmm.
feel about your day.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. I often worry about, people that I see, like Facebook this morning. One of the first posts I saw from a friend of mine was a horrible, awful, negative thing. And my first thought was, is that really how you start your day? And I think it is. That person is just one of those people who looks for the bad. And so, as you said, that's all he's going to see. He is, there really is something in that little saying that we knew when we were little, to stop and smell the roses.
Yeah.
It takes just a little bit of time, but it really does so much. And as that leader, you need to be encouraging it. That's where that's coming in, is you're asking people, okay, what are you grateful for today? And, and even if you're not doing it on a Zoom or something, pop them a quick email, a quick text. As we were saying, people absorb things differently. So, ask them, what are you grateful for today? Just something simple like that. And that comes back to compassion. You're showing them that you care.
Well, it comes back to mindfulness and being aware in the moment. And when I do coaching, we have a process when we do coaching. The first thing that we do, every coaching session starts with a statement of gratitude. And even people that I've coached with for a long time, it could be 2 or 3 years sometimes. And I say, hey, Deb, how you doing? It's really good to see you again. So what are you grateful for? And there's always this pause. You can see that their brain kind of comes to a screeching halt. It's like, gee. And people always say, oh, my family or my friends. I'm like, no, you don't get to say that. When you've coached with me for a while, you don't get to go to the big things. I want a little tiny thing, because what we've learned from Eastern philosophies is, like the Buddhists will say, you know what I'm grateful for? This blade of grass. The smaller, the more in the moment, the more recognizable that we can get mindful. They talk about this mindfulness, and Deepak Chopra talks about this. He says, no, it's not mindfulness. It needs to be mind emptiness. Clear your mind, clear the thoughts, clear the chatter. And if we clear the chatter, we're in the moment, we'll be so much more effective as leaders. Everything that we do, we can be more effective because we can recognize the facial expressions of the person, the tone, the accomplishments. We spend time talking to people with the victories and the successes, and always, 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 let's just be grateful.
Right. I love it. And, that's more important than ever when we're in this virtual world. Because we're not able to see people, to pick up on their body language. I mean, when you're seeing people from, shoulders up, there's an awful lot that you're missing. I could be sitting here with clenched fists, and all sorts of things. And, so to be, fostering that gratitude, all of those compassion, all those things. I mean, we have to be doing it now more so than ever.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And that's the challenge of leadership
Right.
is being able to balance compassion and accountability,
Mhm.
to manage differently, but lead the
Mhm.
same.
Right. Yeah, because the company still has to be making money. The company still, and I shouldn't say has to, because sometimes maybe not. And obviously it depends on what you're doing. I mean, it might just be that this is just the next step in the process. And all of those various things. But it all does tie together.
Yeah. Well, as I tell people today, if you're paying your bills,
Mhm.
be grateful.
Right.
That's a great thing.
Mhm.
Whether it's a
Mhm.
company or personally, if you can pay your bills, because a
Mhm.
lot of people out there that can't.
Mhm.
So,
Right.
yeah.
And I tell you what, I'm grateful that you and I got to chat today, because this has been so much fun, and it's one of those things that I think we don't stop and think about often enough, is because we are caught up in whine, whimper, bitch, and we're all leaders, whether it's of our family, of our team, of our business, of ourselves. How are we doing this? And so I encourage people to read your books. And you've got all sorts of great information. But if somebody wants to reach out to you and connect with you, how do they do that?
Oh, the best way is they can either go to my website, it's
Mhm.
statarius.com,
Mhm.
STATARIUS.com, or just connect with me, Dr. Gary McGrath on LinkedIn. That's the way I connect with a lot of business people and start the process through LinkedIn.
Great. I love it. And again, it's statarius.com. So do you have any final thoughts that you want to leave us with?
I think as I think about what we're going through with this pandemic and everything, and I know I keep saying compassion and accountability a lot. I think that what I could say is just be gentle.
Mm.
Let's see if we can just in all things not judge and be gentle. If we can do that as we get back on track, I'm not going to say normal, but as we get back on track, and we will, because
Mhm.
we're humans, we
Mhm.
survive. Then if we can do that with a little more kindness,
Mhm.
gentleness, and compassion, we can make a difference in our families, our communities, and our lives.
I love it. Well, Dr. Gary, this really has been so much fun. I am so glad that we did this. I can't wait to do it again. So we will definitely chat again. But until then, I'm Deb Creer. I've been having a delightful conversation with Dr. Mary. See, I did it again.
You did it
Dr.
again.
Gary McGrath. And until next time, everyone have a great day.
Tune in for our next program for even more trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. The Business Power Hour, hosted by Deb Creer, is proud to be part of the C-Suite Network.